Welcome to Unleashed, the podcast where we redefine leadership by focusing on what truly matters, the people driving change. Change leadership is about guiding people through transformation in a way that inspires them to embrace change because they believe in it. Whether you're a leader looking to foster a culture of growth or someone eager to break through barriers in life and business, this podcast is for you. Now our host, Wendi.
Welcome to the Unleashed podcast. I am Wendi, and I am your host. Today's guest, Karen Mangia, is a dynamic leader, strategist, and innovator who has helped executives, entrepreneurs, and enterprises around the world solve complex business challenges and drive future growth. As President and Chief Strategy Officer of the Engineered Innovation Group and a former executive at Salesforce, Cisco, and AT&T, Karen brings deep expertise in customer experience, sales leadership, and market insights. She's also an international best-selling author and podcast host. She's dedicated to shaping the future of work. Welcome to the show, Karen.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
I am so looking forward to our conversation. As I said before I hit record, my passions are retail and leadership, and a lot of that has to do with customer experience. And so I'm really excited to dig into those topics of customer experience and leadership. And it sounds like you are just a brilliant leader in both of those categories.
It's a couple of my favorite topics to discuss.
Okay, can't wait. Well, you've taken on multiple roles, and in each of those roles, I think I read in your bio that you would call yourself a catalyst, a creator, a connector, and a coach. Did I get that right?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
Good.
I love to spark change and transformation and see it through until it gets to execution, and then it doesn't excite me that much anymore. I've got to go find my next spark.
It's so satisfying, though, when you get to the end of that, though, and you know you have the next thing. So, share some of your highlights that first come to mind. If you were to really look at your professional journey, how has your career really come down to these 4 C's?
The reason it's those 4 C's is because I excel at growing teams and leading change. Now, that has taken a variety of shapes through the years, leading an underperforming sales team to peak performance, completely transforming the go-to-market business model and the channel partners within it to help make the entire organization more successful and more profitable, on through completely transforming how we listen to customers and really separate the signal from the noise so that we understood the difference between a real market signal and just something we could let pass on by. And in each one of those roles, it involved being able to sense both a market opportunity as well as the talent required to capture that opportunity. So I've long been in the business of capturing heads and hearts, which is really what happens when you're a catalyst. You're sparking people to get excited about a vision that's a little bit beyond what they can see today in a way that they are inspired and compelled to want to participate.
Oh my gosh, Karen, there's so much in that. I want to dig into like 5 of those things. So, let's just start with heart and head. Unpack that a little bit for us. Why is that where you start?
Every business leader worth their salt is going to ask you a question about ROI. If I give you this time, money, or resource, what am I getting back for that? The flip side of the equation is somebody shows up every day with a story of ROI. And yet sometimes we pick the thing where the ROI looks terrible because someone has told us a story that captures our hearts. In the world of customer experience, it's typically how you can help a client, how you can save a client. It can be how you disrupt a competitor. There's something about evoking that competitive spirit that we're all going to pull together in the trenches. We're going to go out there. We're going to work together and we are going to win because at the end of the day, people love to win. And people love to be around winners who can show them the playbook for how to win more consistently and more often, with more people being a part of the winning team.
I love that you say that, Karen, because I have this saying that just tends to resonate with people and we laugh. And, when I'm talking about helping people get better, I always say, look, nobody wakes up in the morning wanting to suck. Like, I don't think people don't wake up and go, wow, how could I really fail today? Or how could I really, not do my, I just don't think that happens. I mean, okay, maybe there is a 0.5%, but I love that you say, we want to win. We want to be around winners. And so if we know that about human nature, how do people end up on teams that are not winning? And how do people not win?
As goes the leadership, so
Mm.
goes the team. The leadership sets the tone for a whole team. This is where your toxic boss, your micromanaging boss, your power hungry boss, your absent boss, your distracted boss, and your kiss up to your boss's boss all get in the way of your ability to be successful to the degree that they will slowly suck the life out of you and everyone
Mm.
around you. Success or failure of the entire organization happens at the middle management layer. It's not the CEOs and it's not your frontline people. It's that mushy middle in between who we hardly ever train about how to be great leaders. So they will either elevate or stifle an entire organization, and that ranges from the stock performance to the human potential performance to the talent retention and beyond.
Karen, that sounds so obvious and it sounds so simple and it's so true. You think about, I just look at my experience when I was promoted. I started in sales at 16 years old and I started at a store that was my absolute favorite store because I wanted the employee discount. Well, before I knew it, I was a top salesperson and our assistant manager left. And I don't know, I think I was 17, maybe 18 years old. I don't even think I was graduated from high school yet. And they're offering me an assistant manager position. And I will tell you, a friend of mine calls this a super doer. The best salespeople are certainly not the best managers. And that was me. I got no training at all. And, I'm still selling because that's my passion and that's what I was good at. And I'm doing schedules and I'm managing and leading people expected to grow the business. And Karen, I learned by trial and error. And I think I was a terrible manager. So,
Yes. And back to your point from earlier, nobody walks around every day in their job and says, you know what? I am a terrible boss. They don't, but we all know who they are.
yeah.
Interestingly enough, a recent Harvard Business Review study shows the average age at which people leaders receive their first training used to be age 42. During the pandemic, it went up to age 44. So the first time you get trained how to be good at that job, you might have already been in it for a decade.
Light bulb moment. That is mind blown. Wow. So, where do we start in this, Karen? Because we know we need to train our managers, and it's not just training to do the job, it's training to lead, and management and leadership are different. So where do you start with companies?
With curiosity. Curiosity is a transcendent business skill.
Mm.
Everyone's favorite topic is themselves. Most managers spend time telling instead of asking. One of the most core questions is getting curious about people's values and beliefs. So imagine if I said to you, what is your top value? And you said to me, it's having dinner with your family. And I asked you why that matters to you so much. And maybe you would say to me, well, we've got a busy household. All of the adults are working and have jobs. And so that family dinner is the one golden hour where the commutes are over. We can have time together. And it's critically important to me to maintain that time. Now imagine I'm your manager. And I've never asked you this question about what matters to you and your values or your beliefs or your priorities. And now I start scheduling a meeting every single night that's mandatory that overlaps your dinner hour with your family. Now, how long is it going to take before you start feeling burned out at your job? About a week. The reality is, burnout is living outside of our values for an extended period of time. And it shocks me how few leaders actually ask their people, why does that matter to you so much? Why does that hour with your family matter to you so much? Great leaders are curious people. They ask questions because inside of questions, you get critically important context to help people perform at their best. We get this leadership paradigm completely wrong. We've somehow have painted this stereotype that great leaders should know everything and they don't need to ask anything. They're just on high dispensing this wisdom, and nothing could be further from the truth. Great discoveries, like great teams, begin as great questions.
Again, sounds so simple, Karen. And there's no lack of information out there that the more curious, the more inquisitive, the more we know our people, the more intrinsically motivated they will be. And we're not using this carrot stick motivation that if you do something great, here's what you get. If you don't, here's what you get. So this is not this is not revolutionary. It's really just relationships. So why aren't more leaders doing this?
One is ego. Ego
Mm,
gets in the way of hearing what our customers are trying to tell us. Ego gets in the way of hearing what our employees are trying to tell us, either in that employee pulse survey or by actually resigning. Ego gets in the way of messages being heard. The second is
mm,
in our belief that leadership is all about getting things done, more often than not, people, instead of seeing the human, see what the human can do for them. Think about how many one-on-ones you've had in your life with a leader that are very focused on a deliverable. Is it done? Why isn't it done? How are you going to get it done? What do you need to get it done? I have to give an update to somebody else about all this stuff we're going to get done. And suddenly our relationship becomes very transactional because you're no longer a human being, you're a human doing. And all I want to know is what you're going to do for me so I can tell the next person up the chain what I'm going to do for them. And so it goes.
that, like, again, mind blown. It's so true. I mean, I think about just even when I was doing one-on-ones, if I just would have taken one moment to go, how's your family? What do you have going on? What's important to you? That would transform culture. And it takes such little effort, Karen.
It takes so little effort. And when someone shares that, ask the follow-up question, why does that matter to you so
Mhm.
much?
Yeah, I don't know about you. I think, we've stopped asking that question why because we don't want to be confrontational and it sounds, well, why? And it's one of the most important questions I think too. I think as kids, naturally when we were born is why is the sky blue? Why can't I have ice cream for dinner? What, and the first time somebody says because I said so, we stop asking why. And yet it is one of the most critical things I think to relationship.
It is. And all human beings want to feel seen and heard.
Mm,
And inside of those questions are always opportunities for leaders to be helpful.
mm,
Naturally, as human beings, are motivated to help others get what they want.
yeah.
The great paradox is that we love to give help and we hate to ask for it. Imagine what would happen by just asking a few simple questions, how motivated you might be to perform for your employees who work for you better.
Mm. So, as I'm hearing you speak, I'm getting excited. As I said, I'm having light bulb, mind blown moments, and I know that you have a podcast, the Future of Work podcast, Success from Anywhere. I know you have 5 bestsellers, some of them even international bestsellers. So clearly, Karen, your message is resonating. What about your message do you think is resonating out there?
Because at the core of every one of those books and keynotes and workshops and retreats and coaching engagement is something that everyone wants: freedom.
Mm,
Inside of each one of those books, inside of each one of those conversations, is the opportunity to find freedom, to find the autonomy that we all want as people. The secret to how to do that is to learn how to create choices. We all love to be given a choice. Nobody likes to be told what to do. Some of the most effective leaders I have ever had the opportunity to work for and with and coach are people who will ask great questions, listen deeply, and then think about, even inside of choices or times where it seems like there are not choices available, what could we create together? What could I, as the leader, offer to you as a choice that I'm willing to live with, that you've told me you'd be willing to live with too? We all feel better when we get to choose. Choice is a very powerful feeling. There's freedom inside the thought that I have a choice. Even if the choice is, do you want to come to the office 4 days a week or 5 days a week? If I'm willing to live with both of those, that might feel like a scenario where there's no autonomy and no choice. And yet there is, if you're willing to be curious and look.
mhm. So you clearly had so much success, working with companies and now partnering with companies. And so do you have a story where you kind of started to put all of this together and you started to say, wow, I'm successful at doing these things. I have a passion for sharing these things with other companies. Is there a story? Is there a transformation? Is there something, how did you get here where you went from actually doing these things to teaching these things?
I'll never forget the time I was asked to give a motivational speech to close an executive conference. I immediately said no because I thought it sounded terrible. I mean, you're the last thing standing between people at a wine bar on a Friday night.
And probably in Vegas, right?
And yes, and motivation is so personal. I thought, how do you know how to motivate or inspire people? In a group setting specifically, maybe in a one-on-one conversation, yes, that's a little bit easier to unlock when you're getting a lot of feedback from a conversation. A bunch of blank stares and people on their phones is a little bit less feedback than I might like from a keynote stage. And eventually, the organizer wore me down. And as I went to take the stage, my primary goal was to not be terrible. That was the full goal. Do
That's a
not,
great goal.
yeah, it was do not suck, frankly. I looked where all the emergency exit doors were in case I needed one of them. And the story I decided to tell was something I called powerful pauses. And it came at a time in my life where I was just coming out of and in a recovery phase from chronically misdiagnosed major medical.
Mm.
And it might surprise you to discover looking at me now that I got to the point where my hair fell out, my skin turned gray, I gained 55 pounds and did not have a baby. One day I looked in the mirror and my eyes had changed color, and teams of doctors had no idea what was wrong with me. And I never missed a day of work for being sick.
Mm.
That's ludicrous. When I say it out loud, I think, how is that possible? We would all say to a friend, you need to take a break. Now, in my instance, it happened to be that I had DDT pesticide poisoning. So yes, there was actually poison going through my body. At the same time, I probably got so sick and stayed so sick for so long because I had poisoned myself with this toxic set of beliefs, like we all do, about what success is and what I needed to do to get it. I was willing to sacrifice my health in order to chase this elusive thing called success. That became a real turning point for me, that for the first time in my life, I had incredible clarity about my top priority. And it gave me a filter about what I said yes to and what I said no to. Because I would think, does this move me closer to or further from my definition of success at that point which was to be healthy enough to enjoy my life for as long as that was going to be possible. And I called it powerful pauses because what I discovered was I started taking some things out of my life and off of my to-do list that did not serve that goal. And what I discovered was it's so empowering to say no to something when you know why you're doing it.
Mm.
There's no guilt. Nobody looked at me and said, you're a terrible person. You're practically bald. You're fat. You look completely unhealthy, but you should stay on the board of this not-for-profit. Nobody says that. Now we're all afraid they're going to, but they don't. And what I found was it was very empowering to say, I love all of these causes. I love my job and I love myself more. And that's why I'm making this choice. And so I talked about these powerful pauses. And as I gave the speech, people got quiet. After it was over, people came up to me. They cried. They hugged me. They asked if I had a YouTube channel. It was a very fascinating experience on a Friday night, again, when they could have all walked over to the wine reception.
Mm-hmm.
About a week later, a woman called me and said, you have to do something with that story. I thought she meant tell the story again to another group of people. What she meant was write your story down. It actually became my first book, Success with Less, Releasing Obligations and Discovering Joy, where I talk about a new formula for success, which is pause, ponder, prioritize. That for me was really the beginning of sharing with people. The LinkedIn of my career looks amazing, and the LinkedIn of my life is a disaster behind it.
What a great picture.
You know, you look at someone's LinkedIn and you think to yourself, oh, they've got it all figured out. And if I just do what they've done, I will have this wonderful looking career trajectory with absolutely no idea of what that person might have sacrificed to get there. And I committed at that point, given the reaction from people, to start sharing that story. And ultimately, through the years, have learned it's a very powerful tool for granting people permission to do what they already know they need to do for themselves. You already know you need to find a different job if you have a terrible boss. You already know you need to go to the gym if you're starting to have health problems. You already know that if you haven't taken a vacation in 2 years, need to take it. Somehow these conversations become a permission granting function where people say, wow, because of your speech, I decided to find a new job. And I think, no, it just let you know that it's okay to do that. So do that. Take care of yourself. And I found through those conversations how much I enjoyed being authentic and sharing some new discoveries and inviting other people to go on this journey together to say, what else could we discover? What else could this be? Does work always have to be this punishing thing where we give up our health and our relationships and our friends and our family in order to go after this? Is that really necessary? What else could this be? Let's get curious together. And that evolved over time into workshops, hands-on experiences, and with everyone from university students to entrepreneurs to executives at huge companies. Then that became half-day retreats that went into a more immersive direction. All of which to say, I find it very gratifying to see people unlock their potential and have the courage to really step into living their values and priorities on a daily basis.
Mm. Well, and I look at your story, which Karen, I concur, what a story that needs to be shared around the world, because it just, people, the cliche, life is short and time is fast and all of that. And there is a choice to create meaningful work and how that relates to a meaningful life. And I'm thinking about a conversation I just had with someone very near and dear to me in my life, and they have been promoted. They're in their second year of their career, and they're making, their first year, they're going to make $200,000 and as an account executive. And they literally looked at me and said, and you know what? I'm no happier. I'm not getting fulfillment. I don't know what to do. A move to another state where their friends are in a completely different state, and where do I go? And money doesn't mean happiness. And just because you have this great job, and so that freedom that you talked about, and also your definition of burnout, those two, burnout is not necessarily working hard or working a lot of hours. Because I think we've all been in careers, hopefully a lot of our listeners have been in careers where we're working hard, we're working long hours, and we are having a great life. That
Yes.
also happens where we're not necessarily working so many hours and we're exhausted because we don't have that fulfillment. So, for those listeners who that's really resonating, which is probably all of them, where do they start?
Start by returning to your values. Press pause and think about, what is your top value right now? And how does that value show up in your everyday life? Write it down. Use an
Mm.
actual pen and paper. There's brain science of why all of these things are good. And then take a look at your calendar for the past 30 days and do an honest assessment of how much of your time has been aligned with living that value. It is revelatory. Now, this was originally created out of something at Stanford called the stress-free experiment. And they started it with university students. 10 minutes, journal, pen and paper. They took a small group and had them do that. The other group just got to journal about whatever they wanted, and they studied those students. They've gone on to repeat this exercise hundreds of thousands of times with everyone from entrepreneurs to executives and everyone in between, and the results are always the same. When we are clear about our top value or values and how those show up in our everyday life, they can statistically measure that you will access higher degrees of resilience, be healthier, be able to create new choices, access new ideas. Because even if your circumstances do not change, the way you see your circumstances does. And by the way, if you write about your top value and you realize that only 10% of your time over the past month has aligned with that, you're discovering the source of the disconnect. You're discovering where you're living out of alignment, which puts you in a position to say, now what am I willing to do about it? Perhaps just a little at a time. If you're in a toxic job, just put into ChatGPT who's hiring for the job you'd love to do or that you have right now. That's as far as you have to go. That's less than 5 minutes one day.
Yeah.
Next day, click on one of the links, read the description, go to LinkedIn and see if you have any connections in common who are working there. That's another 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be, I reconnected with my values, I'm out of alignment, and so tomorrow I must quit my job. It doesn't, we think in these grand gestures, and the 5 minute fix will just get you rolling into some momentum. It all starts with returning to your values and having a real clarity about that.
Yeah. I'm going to make sure that they have this right away because I think, that is so true. I think for me, I make it too complicated and it just doesn't have to be that complicated.
And it might surprise you to discover that I do too. I talk about this, I workshop with this, and yet I did this activity myself, a slightly different version of it that I've started using where there's 16 values and you have to rank them for yourself personally in order of importance, 1 to 16. And then on the other side of that same list is amount of time that you've spent on that ranked 1 to 16. I personally was shocked in January to discover my number 2 value was number 14 in terms of time. And I had this aha moment, like, aha, that's this feeling that something isn't quite right. So I still do this myself. I would love to tell you that it all gets worked out. The reality is our values are an expression of our top preference in any given moment. I mean, when I was sick, it was get healthy. On another end of the spectrum, I have a 101-year-old grandfather that I cook Sunday dinner for every Sunday who's still living. You know what? That value and my time are very well aligned right now because I want no regrets. It shifts. We get to change our values. There's no values judgment on your values, frankly. They're just a fact. This is the most important thing to me right now that I'm willing to spend, hopefully, my best time and energy on. And I will release some obligations that no longer serve me right now to make room for that. It doesn't mean the other things you're letting go of are bad. It just means right now, they're not aligned with your top value. It's the first step in finding freedom.
Wow. Well, and what you talked about earlier is, leaders get to ask those questions about values. And so leaders can actually facilitate conversations like this because it is the individual contributor. It's also the leader. When those two things come together, what it sounds like to me is that's where the magic sauce is.
It is, and it's inside of getting a little curious. I do an activity in all of my workshops where I have people do this values exercise and write it down. And then there's a simple activity. You choose a partner and you just ask, what is your top value? And let that person answer. Then you say nothing. Then you ask, why does that matter to you so much? They get to answer, and then you switch. Every single time, it doesn't matter who the group is, people will say, I've never had a conversation like that with someone before. And instead of asking them, how was your weekend or how was your day or, what's coming up with the next big sale or how's performance looking, you learn something really meaningful about them. A lot of people will discover they have the same value. It matters for different reasons. And it's very powerful to just ask someone a question of that magnitude and then just give them space to answer with no comment. No feedback, not me too, not have you read this book about that, just space for that. It's incredibly validating. And that's also the goodness of where choice starts to happen. Because I find inside of especially teams and organizations, but in our personal lives as well, when we bump up against resistance, someone that's resisting the change, or they will die on the hill for the one thing that seems like it doesn't matter to anybody, it usually means we're bumping up against someone's values or beliefs. And that tool of curiosity, why does this matter to you so much, right? There's 21 people that get a vote on this. 20 people think this thing doesn't matter and you cannot let it go. Why does this matter to you so much? You'll be amazed what they'll say. That's the beginning of how you get into creating choices together. Well, what else could this be? In light of that, what options do we have? Help me come up with something. Let's do this together. That's a productive activity. That's also where the manager, the leader becomes the coach, not the hub and spoke. Not, you have a problem, you come to me, I tell you what to do, you go do that. Then you come back and I tell you how you did on that. And then we keep doing that. Now I'm coaching you with something you can use on your own when you're stuck. You don't have to come to me. You can think about this. You can do this with a coworker. You can do this with a client. You can do this with a prospect.
Well, and is that one of the biggest differences between a manager and a leader is a manager is saying, here's what we're going to do. We are all going to do this, giving direction, overseeing versus leadership to me is what it's that collaboration, it's the choice, it's the freedom, and we may have a completely different result, better result because of that collaboration. So different.
Yes, and coaching creates independence. Management and micromanagement creates codependence. You
Oh,
have to come
wow.
to me for everything. That doesn't scale. This is part of why this middle management chunk gets so burnt out. I mean, if everybody has to come to you for everything because you've set it up that way,
Mm.
wow, that's tough to scale.
And then we're going to have consistent turnover with the 33% of the labor force not coming back after COVID. I mean, that just you start to see the ripple effect of that middle management not being trained. And we're not talking about their job. I think most managers are trained to do their job. They aren't being trained to lead.
Yes, and one of the greatest gifts of my leadership career came at the point where I started leading people who were doing jobs I had never done. Because at the end of the day, you don't know how to tell them what to do
Right.
because you don't know literally what they're doing. You are left with the need to ask a lot of questions. I found that to be the most fascinating teacher because when you manage people, your example was such a great one. I'm a great salesperson, so they made me a sales leader. Well, when you're a sales leader, you know what you did as a salesperson. Therefore, you have a directionally correct sense of what to ask, how people spend their time, what levers you can pull, the moments that matter. Hey, now you start managing someone, imagine in your world, who works in finance. I mean, you probably don't know what they do. You've never done it. And it's like, well, you're going to need to bring me up to speed. That was a wonderful gift of tapping into. They don't need me involved in every detail or making decisions for them. They need someone to have their back. They need a listening ear. They need obstacles removed when they get stuck. Sometimes they need an escalation. That's pretty much it. As long as you've hired well, these people are really capable. So you're there to coach and support and mentor and guide. I literally couldn't do the jobs of many of the people I've managed since that period of time,
Yeah.
engineering being one of those. So I have to trust that you're doing a great job. I can help you with nuances. I can help you when you're stuck. It's very interesting activity because you're literally no longer the expert. So you're forced into the learning and curiosity mode. That's paid wonderful dividends for me as a leader.
Yeah. So I want to change gears just a little bit. It does, you do leaders, you work with leaders to lead better. You do market insight work. You also do customer experience work. And I'm curious, what evolutions have you seen in this whole world of customer experience? I mean, one of your titles was customer experience officer and CXO, which I love. 5 years ago, that was not a role in organizations. So what changes have you seen and why have those changes happened in customer experience?
It's funny you mentioned this because I recently reconnected with a leader who was doing customer experience at another very large company at the time, and we were on a customer experience council together. It was all of us as early pioneers doing these roles and learning from each other and sharing ideas and leaning on each other for support. And I just reconnected with this leader, and he said, looking back at it now, I realized we were in kind of a support group together because no one understood the power of the possible with all of these ways that customers let you know what they want and need or what's not working. That could be your call center recordings, that could be surveys you send out, that could be conversations with leaders, it could be events, it could be how often they buy your product or do they buy other products in your portfolio, all incredibly relevant. At that point, when customer experience was really becoming a concept, one of the biggest challenges was anything truly meaningful. I mean, breakthrough strategy for the business or save the big client or knock off a competitor or gain some market share was a very manual activity.
Mm.
We are blessed with a preponderance of tools and technology now that can take a call recording from a call center and a survey that someone filled out, even if different teams own them and they sit in different systems, and then the notes from a customer advisory board or from a focus group and put that all together and say, here's what you could do about it. We did not have the gift of those wonderful tools. It was these brilliant data analysts who would spend hours and hours trying to piece this data together and figure out what it means. And then you get a lot of questions about statistics and have we heard from all the right people to really bet a business strategy on this or our customer retention strategy on this or bet our brand on this. And so one of the biggest changes, besides people being more receptive to, hey, listening to the people who do business with us or could, is a wonderfully rich source of information. And especially if we act on it. Now the addition of technology means that I think we're all as organizations in a better position to let our customers know we're hearing them because we can reflect back to them what they might be saying to us in a variety of different ways.
Mm.
And it frees up the humans in the business to do the important creative work, relationship building work, and either fixing things that are broken or, bringing new products and services to market.
Hmm. Well, and I think back in the day, you talked about measurement and customer experience and how far we've come. When I first started my consulting career, it was, I don't know, I think it was 1994, and we were doing mystery shops as part of our needs assessment. And we would have like a little video pin that we would actually video our interaction. We would go in as a customer, and I've never seen so many executives almost in tears. They're going, "This is really actually what's happening in our stores," and they just had no idea. And so today, customer experience then is measured in so many different ways. And I think there's so often exactly what you said is that maybe we are hearing it and yet we're not taking action on it. Or, are we really gathering the data that we need? And so, I'm curious what you're seeing out there in terms of customer experience and what's the biggest mistake that customers make when they actually think that they're listening to their customers.
The biggest mistake that organizations make is believing that they know what a
Mm.
customer wants, as opposed to asking and even more importantly, tuning into what are the messages that customers are sending you that you're not asking them about. Every company has some set of questions that you ask a customer, whether that was you had a customer support experience, how was it, on a scale of 1 to 5, for example, how likely are you to renew, whatever that looks like. You've got a certain set of things you want to know from your customers because you're trying to keep them and sell them more, frankly. Very oftentimes, a missed source that is pure gold is listening to some of those call center recordings or getting some of those themes and looking at those comments that come back on surveys or that people write in reviews on Yelp or consumer product reviews on places like Amazon and looking at what is it that they are consistently telling you that you have no initiative in your portfolio to address, but comes up pretty consistently. Because what you'll find is either a really hot new market opportunity or a problem that you are not aware that they have, and so you're not asking about it.
Mm.
So sometimes it is, even with all these wonderful tools, even with all of the feedback we can get, we still miss things because we're focused on the questions we're answering that or asking that we want to know the answers to, as opposed to what a customer actually wants to tell us.
That's a huge reframe because it is so true. Yeah, sure. On United Airlines, I'm a million mile flyer on United Airlines. I hit that last year. And I had these huge expectations, Karen. Like, I'm going, oh, yeah, I'm going to get upgraded all the time. Every single time I fly, I'm like 24, 28. Because what I didn't realize is I'm not a 1K anymore because I'm not flying as much. And
Yes.
so, that million miles means absolutely nothing.
I am in the same boat as you. I lost my 1K status because of not traveling. It's a different world.
It
And
is
they
a
don't
different.
care that you've spent a million miles and heaven only knows how many dollars
Yeah.
getting to that point. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And they're not asking the question.
Not
And
us.
so I think that reframe is so important. Yeah, they are asking a bunch of questions, and I get a survey every single time that I fly. I got one last night, and I'm filling that out. And yet I'm filling it out, and I didn't realize it till you just said that. They're not asking the right questions. And so, it's slanted towards, what they're looking for, and yet they're missing so much information. So I think that is just that's critical. And I look at customer experience, back in the day, I make myself sound so old, and it's fine. I'm good. Um, we used to talk about customer service, and I kind of joke when I do keynotes in to retailers because if you're a retailer and you're still talking about customer service, go to Walmart, go to the right-hand side, and there's a big blue and white sign that says customer service. And that's where we do our returns. That's where we ask where the washroom is. That's not what the customer expects anymore. It is truly this customer experience, which is now this more omni-channel and, it's website. I found myself trying to get something done the other day and I'm arguing with a chat bot. This old thought of AI and how efficient it's becoming. And quite frankly, you talk to any customer and they go, I just want to talk to a person. And yet it's impossible.
Yes, it is impossible.
I mean, I actually just recently flew to Colorado. I live in Orlando, and I was on hold with a company that were trying to change my mom's cell phone service, and it took me an entire afternoon, and I still was not able to talk to someone. And so I flew to Colorado. We went to a store, and we spent the afternoon there. And it's just a company's perception of the experience they're providing versus the customer who's saying, here's my reality. Merging those two together, where do companies start, Karen?
Start small. And I will give you a couple of great examples. One is a large health insurance provider, and they decided to start trying to do more with their call center recordings. They realized they were probably missing some critically important themes. And they did this work to match up what are themes that we hear about from these calls consistently that we don't ask about either verbally in a
Mm.
question, it's not in our script, and it's not in our survey afterwards, and it may be something that's a source of incredible pain.
Mm.
As a result of that listening activity, they created something called the No Homework Initiative. Because what would come up very frequently is customers would use that actual word. They would call in and say, I received this statement in the mail. It's not right for the following reasons. And then the customer service agent would say, well, then you need to call your physician and get the following things, and then call us back with that. So it's exactly the loop that you're talking about, where you're dreading this insane amount of time. And in the world of health insurance, you're probably not feeling well while all this is happening. And then they would give you homework. You would have to go do the homework. So they just said step one was every time that this comes up, that you are flagging to a customer, you have to go get some other piece of information or take a step before you can come back to us. Just make a note of what it is. Because they wanted to categorize what were the themes inside of this homework. What are we asking them to go get? Next step in their journey was they took a small group of their call center agents and said, hey, we're going to temporarily pause you need to get these calls resolved and handled in a certain amount of time. Instead, what we want you to do is keep that person on the line and do the homework with them. Say, hey, you know what? Let's get your physician's office on the phone right now. I can ask for what they need, tell them where they need to send it. Let's see if we can get it resolved. So they started chipping away at a very big challenge. I mean, if you think about the world of healthcare, insurance, human beings with different insurance and different medical codes, and then you've got government regulations in there, there's a lot happening. And people feel distressed. It's distressing to receive an unexpected $10,000 bill in the mail, for example, or find out you were denied for a surgery for which your physician is telling you must have it. And so they took something very big and very overwhelming. I mean, if they rolled that out, we're going to stop, having our customers go do things. That would be a 5-year, $500 million initiative that would just get crushed under its own weight. This was start small. Hey, stop giving people homework. They're literally using that phrase. Now let's call this thing the No Homework Initiative. Now let's inventory the homework. Now let's pick one category of homework and pick a few people to try out a different approach, and let's see what happens. It became a company-wide initiative. Another one was a tech company that was in the period of a refresh. It was kind of a fading brand, let's say, in the marketplace, and they were trying to bring themselves into a new era and reinvent themselves. And they knew that repositioning an entire brand, the way you see a company, imagine it's not Radio Shack, but imagine if I said to you, Radio Shack wants to make an amazing comeback. You would think to yourself, that is a daunting experience to undertake. What this organization did instead is they took a pain point that they could fix more quickly, and it was this. Lots of organizations now, to your point of the chatbot, have an online community of some sort. Hey, you can post your question in here, and other people who buy from us, who are our power users, will help answer some of these questions. If the answer is great, other people put stars by it, so you know it's a good answer and it's a recent answer. In their world, they had let monitoring that online community from a company perspective kind of go by the wayside. And so what they did was they said, they rolled out in this on their call center scripts, everywhere else. Hey, you can go to this community and get an answer. Someone from our company there will respond within 24 hours. So they just started doing that. And sometimes the answer was, we need to go get more information, get back with you. But within 24 hours, every comment and question put in their online user community, essentially, or support community, got a comment from an employee at their company. They use that to buy time and shift the perspective and the perception. Wow, this company is really stepping it up. They're starting to really invest in giving us great service so that they could buy time to refresh their product portfolio, their go-to-market strategy, their whole brand look and feel, which they knew was going to take more time. So it was a magic trick. Watch your customer experience improve over here, and ultimately we will make a big revival of the company on the other side. We're just buying ourselves time and loyal followers, loyal customers who would say, wow, you know what? This experience is better than I'm getting at the competitor. So I'll come back here. I'll do this again. So it was a very smart customer experience play for company transformation.
So smart. I love the examples because that just brings it all to life. And, you start to see the merging of customer experience and leadership and innovation and how all of that begins to work together to morph to just some phenomenal outcomes. And I can see how I just finished a book, A Blue Ocean Strategy, and, getting out of the red where all the competitors are, and, how do you move out into something that nobody else is doing. And if you aren't paying attention and you aren't listening and you aren't responding and you aren't leading well by getting buy-in and innovation and collaboration and all of that, you're just going to be left behind, because I can see how these companies are just transforming, and you are a big part of that, Karen. You are just brilliant.
Well, it was fun to be surrounded with great people who felt motivated to solve some of these challenges and to stick with it, right? Some people will just say to you, this is too big. We can't do this.
Yeah.
We'll never get there. And I'm always grateful for the people who are willing to go on those longer journeys and figure out how to make it fun and put milestones in place to celebrate success. And it's just that feeling, just like we were talking about earlier, if you want to make a big change, think about the 5-minute fix, not the grand gesture. Same is true when it comes to customer experience. What could you do with 5 minutes or one comment, or focusing in on one little area that you're going to address so people start to feel a little momentum, that the tide is shifting and they want to join this winning team because they see the wins are going to start stacking up now and they want to go with you and be a part of that.
Yeah, and do that and do it well. And then I can see how that starts to build. And that also starts to change culture, because the internal team is saying, wow, we really care about customers, and they're taking action. Because I think so many companies say, yeah, we care about our customers, and yet put your money where your mouth is. That's not where their focus is. So
Your
powerful.
stated experience must match their lived experience.
That's exactly right. So well said. Well, Karen, we could go on for another 2 hours. I mean, this is just so rich. So I just appreciate you sharing your brilliance, you sharing your learnings, you sharing some of your strategies. You gave us some really great tactical things that we can do today. So I'm just curious, for you personally, what is the legacy that you will leave on this world?
My hope is that I inspire people to lead better lives.
One person at a time, one company at a time, and you certainly are doing that. And so we will make sure, I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of our listeners who are going to want to learn more. And I will make sure that your books and your contact information is in the show notes. What's the best way to contact you?
LinkedIn is the best way to contact me. You can send me a note through the messenger, and I post new content multiple times a week, ranging from great insights and wisdom from those Sunday dinners with my 100-year-old grandfather all the way through what's happening in customer experience and AI and more.
So good. Well, we will make sure for our listeners, we'll make sure that Karen's information and again, the name to her podcast and her LinkedIn, all of those things will be in the show notes. And Karen, I just want to thank you again on behalf of our listeners and myself. You've made me better today. So I just want to thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Unleashed with Wendy Swanson. Make sure to subscribe and follow to be notified when the newest episodes of the podcast go live. Please take a moment to rate and review us. It helps others discover Unleashed and join our movement of forward-thinking leaders. You can find contact information and important links in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode, and remember, keep leading with authenticity, embrace change, and choose to live life unleashed.